My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Brookwood Community Church in Shakopee and a member of the chamber, and I'll serve as moderator this evening. Our candidates for Scott County Commissioner, District 1, are incumbent Joe Wagner and Barb Weckman-Brecky. Our candidates for District 4 are Mr. Dave Beer and incumbent Barbara Marshall. Would you welcome our candidates this evening? The candidate for District 2, incumbent Tom Wolf, was invited but is not attending this evening. Candidates are arranged in alphabetical order by district. Candidates will have 1 minute to make opening statements. After that time, I'll be asking them questions, and they'll each have 1 minute to respond. In some cases, their opponents will be given 30 seconds to make rebuttal comments, and as moderator, I'll have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions. If I ask a follow-up question, candidates will have 30 seconds to give their follow-up responses. Each candidate is now going to have 1 minute to make opening statements. Mr. Wagner will begin with you.
I have to be first. Okay. Hi, Joe Wagner. I've had the honor of representing District 1 for quite a while now. District 1 in Scott County is it's pretty unique. It encompasses almost half the land mass of Scott County. It's 7 townships, and when you represent 7 townships, you got to stay in tune with the people because so with 7 townships, Scott County is a zoning and planning land use authority, and you have to be accessible, and I feel that I am. I think I've done a good job, but there's a lot going on in District 1. I mean, we've got the Renaissance Festival is thinking on moving. That's going to be problems. Jordan Aggregates, Solar Gardens, Marion Mines, Bill Bryan and Bruce Malkerson is looking at 640 acres expanding down there. 41 and 169. There's a lot going on in District 1, and I don't know. I think I've done a pretty good job for my people, and I'd like to continue serving. Thank you.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks so much to River Valley Church for hosting us tonight. Thanks so much to the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce, because this is a fun event and a very necessary event. I've been interested in county government since I was a teenager, actually a preteen. I had the opportunity in Scott County 4-H to work with some great Scott County commissioners, Dallas Bonzak, Tony Worm, Bill Koniarski, people we know and respect, and I started being interested in county government then. I think it's the workhorse of government. It provides services that impact us every day, but it's kind of invisible. A lot of people don't know much about county government. I love county government. I want to work to help make Scott County even a better place. I want our children to choose to buy houses here back in Scott County. I want us to have good jobs here in Scott County. And I want our senior citizens to be able to retire here and enjoy their hard-earned wealth here in Scott County. So those are my goals, those are my dreams, and like Mr. Wagner said, there's a lot going on.
So these are our District 1 candidates, and now for our District 4 candidates, Mr. Beer.
Good evening, Scott County. Thanks for coming tonight. And I have to agree, thank you so much for River Valley for hosting us and for the Shakopee Chamber to put this together, because it's really necessary that we all get engaged in our local government, state government, and if we have to, the federal government. I don't know, it's a little interesting right now, but you know, there is a lot going on in this county. This county has a lot to offer. We've had tremendous growth. I had relatives living in this county for years that I came to visit when I lived up north, and I knew when I came to the cities, I wanted to live in Scott County. I live in Prior Lake with my bride and 3 children, 20, 17, and 13. We love it. The quality of life is awesome. The people are awesome. The people are what makes the quality of life so good. And I want to protect that. My goal, if elected, is to return freedoms to the people where it belongs. Government is for you. You are not for government. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. I adjusted my mic. I hope it's still working. Good evening, everyone. I'm Barbara Marshall, and I have been a 40-year resident and taxpayer in Scott County. I became interested in the county years ago when I worked for a private company doing research out of the government center. I got to know the systems and the employees and the services, and I looked at my double-digit increases and I said, we can do better than this. When I ran for election, those became my top priorities, and I have to say that we have accomplished many of those. When I look at Mr. Beer's website, he is still describing Scott County of 20 years ago. It's not like that. So I have made the improvements because they were my priorities. We are a great county, low taxes, great service, and we have a great quality of life. We are growing every year because people want to live here. And I support this community. I raised my family here. They still call it home.
Thank you. Candidates, our first question this evening is, what is your vision for Scott County? Ms. Weckman-Brecky, will begin with you.
Well, gosh, I think I just talked about my vision for Scott County. I want Scott County to be a place where young people, working people, and elderly people can live wonderful, safe, healthy lives. I think that everyone here in Scott County wants taxes to be low and wants government to provide only those essential services. We're almost all in agreement about that. So my vision really is that young people want to return to the county. They want to live here, like Commissioner Marshall just said, are able to buy houses here, get jobs here. I hope that we'll provide the necessary amenities to have a great quality of life here. And I want people who've lived here a long time and built up this community to be able to live here and enjoy their retirement. I think sometimes with the pressures of growth, we start to make decisions quickly and too quickly sometimes without thinking about the people that live here. Our transportation options, it's one thing to move people really well from Minneapolis to Mankato, but we need to move people around the county too.
Mr. Beer, what is your vision for Scott County?
Before I get into that, I would like to say, Barbara brought up my website. Please go check it out. I know we're streaming this and it'll be available to people online. voteforbeer.com. All of the information you'll find there is based on this calendar year, so it's not from yesteryear. The vision of Scott County, we have got a gem in Scott County. We've got something here that other people want. And we have got to be careful that we steward that well. To me, it comes down to stewardship. We need to steward what we have. We need to give the people what they need. And we keep talking about that, well, what if we cut all these essential services? That's kind of part of what we do, provide essential services. So I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, especially when we only have a minute. We've got quality of life. We have got to protect that. We've got to restore freedoms to the people and not more taxes and create new ones. That is not the vision of Scott County, and that's where we're at today.
Ms. Marshall, what is your vision for Scott County?
I'd like to continue the trends that we are on and have been on for recent years. We have lowered our tax rates and are not any longer at the highest tax counties. We've improved our quality of life in many areas, new libraries, new regional parks, trails. We have safe communities, and we work with our partners across the county, our cities, other counties, to create partnerships to develop the best possible projects and plans for the people who live here. We can always improve by making greater partnerships, investments in transportation that keep our roads safe and the public travel moving. So there are many things that we can do on the great amenities we already have. And I would say that our model of Scott County is a model across the state for things that we do, deliver services in different ways, partnership in ways that others have tried,
Yes.
had some success, but not like Scott County.
Mr. Wagner, what is your vision for Scott County?
I think, well, it's kind of hard act to follow with these three here. It's just pretty much the same as what's just been said. Maintain our quality of life. The district that I represent, I always like to coin, maintain our small town and rural way of life. And that's important down there. And I think that what constantly threatens the district that I represent is the fact that we have all the open land. And we have to be very, very careful. We have to, like they said, stewards of the land. We have to be careful, see what we do, and maintain what we have. Thank you.
Well, let's pivot to a transportation question now. And the question is, what road projects should be a priority for Scott County in the coming years that are not scheduled already? What road projects should be a priority for Scott County in the coming years that are not already scheduled? Mr. Beer, we'll begin with you.
Well, tell you what, I am really grateful that I don't have to commute that often outside the county, because I'll tell you, there's a bottleneck at, I probably don't even have to say it, we all know it, 18, 169, and 101 in that interchange. I should say it's a great place to put signs because people get to see them and they steal them often. But I think that's something that we need to address. I know there's a study going on, but what are the options going to be? Are we going to bust open a light rail at that kind of expense? Are we going to add another lane to that? We have got to do something because that is an absolute bottleneck. And I would also say that stretch from 169, which really is not that old, from the Bloomington Ferry Bridge west towards about Canterbury, is a dangerous stretch of road, even though it's that straight. You drive that in the winter and there's always people in the ditch. So I think that's something that needs to be dealt with because that's definitely a life-threatening issue.
Ms. Marshall, what road projects should be a priority for Scott County in the coming years that are not already scheduled?
Well, we've done a lot in transportation, but they've already been scheduled. Many of them have been completed, and it has made a great difference in people's ability to move quickly, safely on our roads. I think the focus in the coming years needs to be on our county roads. We have areas that are not as safe as they could be because they don't have turn lanes. They don't have an intersection that has enough traffic signs that guide people. So if you're new to the area, you may be a little confused about exactly where to go. So county roads, but the interchanges that have already gone in, the one is scheduled for 41 and 169. Those are really important roads. So we support things not even in our county. The 494, 169 isn't in Scott County. The Highway 5 and 101 is in Dakota County. It makes a big difference for our commuters. So we will continue to look for opportunities like that to keep the traffic moving and safety on our roads.
Mr. Wagner, what road projects should be a priority for Scott County in the coming years that are not already scheduled?
Well, I know I'm supposed to talk about ones that aren't already scheduled, but I'm really proud of the fact that one in my district, 41 and 169. I mean, Scott County has been really remarkable at writing and applying for federal grants. They got $10 million and then another $7 million. So they got $17 million on that project. But otherwise, obviously, the 282 and 169 in my hometown of Jordan. And like Dave just said, I'm grateful that I live and work in my district. And but like I said, there are other ones, but the 282, 169 is a huge one. Anytime you have a stoplight on a 65-mile-an-hour freeway, literally 169, it's incredibly dangerous. And like I said, that one will be my top priority. Thank you.
Ms. Buckman-Breckby, what roads are a priority for Scott County in the coming years that are not already on the books?
I too believe that many of our most pressing road projects are on the books. I think I'd like to speak to the non-county roads, 41 and 169, 282 and 169, that my belief is the county needs to really work hard and engage with the citizens who live along those roads, who have businesses along those roads. I think over the past few months, I've talked a lot to folks in Belle Plaine who wish that things were a little bit different with their overpass, and I think we can learn from that, and we need to really engage with those jurisdictions and those business and landowners along the highway there, because this is infrastructure we're creating that's going to be used for decades, for up to for 50, 60 years. It's really important we do it right. Finally, the not scheduled transportation projects. I've also heard from some folks, probably in Helena and Sand Creek Township, about railroad crossings and safety at those on some of our county roads.
Thank you, candidates. As we continue on the topic of transportation for just another moment, what is the right balance between spending on mass transit and spending on roads when it comes to moving people? What's the right balance between spending on mass transit and spending on roads? Ms. Marshall, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think we missed the boat years ago when we had the opportunity to bring some mass transit out here, and we decided that it was too expensive, and now it's really expensive. There are opportunities, but not many that are slated for our area. And so if you live in the downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul area, you do have opportunities. And a lot of the funding comes from the Met Council, from state and federal grants. And until the lines get closer to our county, I think that we need to figure out where they might go. It's going to be expensive no matter what. We try to divide our resources between roads and transit, and most of it goes to roads just because that's where we are. We don't situate ourselves in the downtown areas where there's a lot of population that might make use of this. If it was here, would people use it? Yes. But I still hear from residents who say, how come we don't have our buses full? So until we get the buses full, maybe we should not spend too much on mass transit.
All right. Mr. Wagner, what is the right balance between spending on mass transit and spending on roads?
I don't know. You know, mass transit, that's a tough one. People are addicted to their cars. You can build a mass transit and everything, but to try to get people to actually use it is another story. People like using their cell phones, they like smoking cigarettes, they like drinking coffee, and that's what they like doing when they go to work. And boy, it's a great idea, but sometimes I wonder if it's really worthwhile in the long run on the whole transit. Thank you.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky, what is the right balance between spending on mass transit and spending on roads?
Right now, with the current demographics of our county, I think the right balance is spending most of our efforts on roads. We don't have the density, and we don't have people going to the same places at the same time. I think we've found that out with all the work the county and several of the cities have done with the bus schedules. And they've done a great job at adjusting those and creating new opportunities as people show what they need. I think really the answer is something the county's already working on, the whole 50 by 2030, trying to get half of our population to actually work in Scott County, having jobs here, having people involved in their communities, and not having to commute so much. I think that's a great effort that we want to continue to work on, and that's hopefully going to save us all money in the long term.
Mr. Beer, what's the right balance between spending on mass transit and spending on roads?
You know, I appreciate that question, and I want to honor that question. But I think the real question is, what are we going to do when the Met Council comes and tries to jam mass transit down our throat? I think that is the question that needs to be asked. I think that's the question that needs to be answered. It's not going to be an easy answer. I believe it is sitting on a county board, if elected. Again, I go back to Scott County has so much to offer. I mean, it's a great place to work. It's a great place to live. But a lot of people don't work in the county. But Met Council is bent on jamming mass transit everywhere it can and putting the cost on the communities that it goes into. Is this board, or who is going to stand up to the Met Council and any other governing body that's going to come in and start dictating things into our community? That is a real sore subject with me and a point of priority for me, that we need to be strong, understand what we have.
Thank you.
And the investment needs to be on them.
Thank you. And you raise a topic that we'd like to pivot to of the relationship between transportation, housing, and the workforce here in Shakopee. How can public transportation, including buses, contribute to providing the needed workers to Shakopee businesses? And Mr. Wagner, will begin with you on this. How can public transportation, buses, et cetera, contribute to providing the needed workers for Shakopee businesses?
Well, buses needing to bring workers here. You know, I think a spin-off on that question is that we have to be careful in Scott County with any kind of tax incentives, tax breaks, rebates, anything, with some of these companies that are producing non-livable wage jobs. That's why we're talking about using buses to bring them here. You know, John Steinbeck in the 1930s, when he wrote The Grapes of Wrath, the vegetable farms in the Salinas Valley, they were busing people in from King City and San Francisco because they weren't livable wage jobs, and these people didn't have enough money for automobiles. And I think that fundamentally this problem about bringing people in here is caused by non-livable wage jobs that Scott County has brought here. and they shouldn't be encouraging it with some of these tax abatements on it. Thank you.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky, how can public transportation, buses and the like, contribute to providing the needed workers for Shakopee businesses?
I think that businesses can take the lead on that, and they know what kind of workers they need, where they might find them. I know they're doing that already. I think we've seen Shakopee area businesses start to figure that out. They're looking at letting new temporary employees work from home right now at Shutterfly or Amazon. So I think there's a lot of answers to that. Is it necessarily bringing the workers here to Shakopee, but maybe creating a better way for them to get the workers they need. Mystic Lake Casino does an awful good job of bringing buses of people from everywhere to their casino. If a company really needs to do that, that's going to benefit their bottom line, and they really can take the lead for that. Following up on Commissioner Wagner's comments, I think it's really important that tax incentives or abatement are not used for companies that aren't going to provide livable jobs. That's very, very true and very important.
Mr. Beer, how can public transportation such as buses contribute to providing the needed workers to Shakopee businesses?
You know, I suspect I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record here because I tend to agree with that. It's this weird cycle that chicken or the egg, and one feeds the other, and not in a good way. So we have all these huge companies, primarily in Shakopee. They need a workforce. I don't know what the percentage is, but a large percentage is not coming from Scott County. So then we give these companies money. Hey, plant your facility here. Give them some tax breaks, which maybe we'll get to also. Then we need to subsidize getting them their workers, and it just feels like we are giving away our future and our current when doing that. So it's an issue, it needs to be dealt with, but I think that we need to go back to what's the root cause. Otherwise, we're just putting a Band-Aid on something that really isn't going to heal on its own.
Ms. Marshall, how can public transportation such as buses and the like contribute to providing the workers needed for Shakopee businesses?
Well, definitely workforce housing is making its appearance in our county, increasing. And many of the people in that category do not have cars, so if there is no ability to get on a bus or some kind of public transportation to get to their jobs, that's a problem. The companies who are looking for workers and having trouble filling their positions have expressed that concern about getting an adequate number of workers to their place of employment. We have engaged them, some of them, in conversations saying, it's time for you to step up and help with this because it's your workers and you need them. And in order for it to be successful, their participation is critical. And not to place the burden of more burden on the taxpayers to get transportation for businesses that are already there. So it's doable, but it takes some cooperation.
Well, not to sound like a broken record, but we do want to pivot to asking the housing question then. You have all raised the housing question in some form or another, but some people who work in Scott County can't afford to live here, and the bottom line question is, what do we do? And Ms. Marshall, we'll start with you on this question.
Well, housing has been the buzzword in our community for quite a while. People who can't afford some types of housing need help. There are programs through some of our organizations that can help them find a place to live, but there aren't that many and needed more. I know that sometimes those types of housing projects are not well received in communities, but they are needed, and many of them work out very well. So partnerships with agencies who already have the responsibility to help people find housing, they're out there, and they need support from the community to make sure that they can put projects together that will serve the needs of the public. I think we're getting more and more understanding of the need and where they can fit. So
Thank you.
It's a work in progress.
Mr. Beer, some people who work in Scott County can't afford to live here. What do we need to do?
I tell you, we're answering these questions, and they're these little snippets, dropping into housing, transportation, working. We all need to step back and take a holistic approach to this. I know you're trying to get at some information, but if we govern the same way we answer all these problems, nothing gets solved. So my solution would be, let's take a step back at this. Let's flowchart this thing. I can't believe I'm saying that. And let's look at all of these root causes and quit chasing the chicken and the egg. Because if you just solve these slices of the problem, nothing goes away. You solve a piece of it, but you still have a whole pie left. And so until we have the courage to do that, because it is messy, it takes time, you have to have the passion and the energy to do that, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road if we just take these one off. Thank you.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky, some people can't afford to live in Scott County, they work here. What do we do?
I think we need to really look at all of Scott County. There's a variety of housing types all over Scott County. I kind of think I grew up in workforce housing, right, Mom? I don't know. I think we need to look at how it's defined. I think we need to define it, not have the Met Council define it. And I think we need to provide opportunities for people. Again, if you're just out of high school and getting a job, yeah, you can't afford a $250,000 house in Shakopee. But there's plenty of options around here. We need to do better at defining that, better at making sure that the private sector sees where and how they can invest and create housing for all kinds of people. I don't like the definitions right now. I don't like the Met Council taking the lead on it. I think we can do it as a community, and if there is a need for more particular housing close to a business, I think that business needs to be at the table.
Mr. Wagner, some people who work in Scott County can't afford to live here. What do we need to do?
Well, I think the housing problem, the lack of affordable housing, it boils down to the fact what the county and the state government, what they tax this at. I mean, when you're dealing with about 25% of your gross rent is going to pay the taxes on your building, you have to have an incentive for builders and landlords to build affordable housing. And they can't build affordable housing at the rate they're being taxed. And that's the core problem on it. It doesn't balance out. You can't. The tax structure says you can't. That's what the problem is.
Well, District 1 candidates, let's focus on the two of you for just a moment with a question about the environment. The Scott County Board recently denied a permit for a gravel mine in Sand Creek Township. Ms. Weckman-Brecky, how would you approach a decision like this if you were the one making this decision?
I understand. I tried to follow that decision closely. It was very hard because I think many of us who live in Scott County, we really believe in personal property rights. We want to do what we want with our own property, but there becomes a point when the balance shifts, and if what we want to do with our property really negatively impacts our neighbors, I think in this case, the potential of negatively impacting water supply, really impacting transportation, it was a hard decision for the board. I totally acknowledge that. I think that decisions like that really need work on the forefront, and this was one that really was worked on for many, many years. It seems the community waited to get involved or wasn't able to get involved until late in the process. I think it's really important to have the local townships, the local jurisdictions, and the residents involved from the forefront. And some of that's up to the developer and the property owner to make sure that they're bringing people along for their vision.
Mr. Wagner, when the Scott County Board denied a permit for the gravel mine in Sand Creek Township, what were the critical factors in helping you decide how you voted?
Well, that really was a slam dunk. I mean, you have possible groundwater contamination there. I'm very familiar with that land. It's right across from where I live. And if it wasn't for the groundwater, I would have been for that mine because you need that gravel. And you can't pick and choose. This isn't like the solar gardens where the sun shines everywhere. This gravel is only in certain pockets, and you need to mine it. This gravel isn't going to fall from the sky, and you have to mine it. You can't. Some of the best pockets of gravel were actually here in Shakopee, but they let housing on it first, and the gravel is lost. And that decision was basically, it wasn't the truck traffic, it wasn't dust, it wasn't noise. It got back down to the water. And it wasn't that tough of a decision on that. But as Barb says, I respect landowner rights, but so are the rights of everyone else around here.
Would you like a follow-up?
Oh, I just want to remind Mr. Wagner that I think you said it was a very hard decision at the county board meeting after the vote.
Can I rebut?
Absolutely. 30 seconds.
It was a tough decision in one way, and that is I felt empathy for Mr. Henches and the amount of effort, work, and money he put into that project. That part made me uncomfortable. However, it still got back to the water.
Bringing up the topic of the solar garden, are the recently approved solar gardens in Sand Creek Township a good idea? Why or why not? Mr. Wagner, will begin with you.
I don't know. There's so much talk, and I don't know how much fact or fiction is to it with the stray voltage and the glare and things like that. I look at those projects, and to me, again, this isn't like gravel. The sun shines elsewhere, and to me, get the power lines and put it where it's not obtrusive, where it won't possibly affect any of the neighbors' land values or anything else on it. And to me, that is one of the things that you can, it's so visible. It isn't like the power lines when they go through it, or the oil line that went through. The oil line went through, it's buried 20 feet down, that nobody even remembers where they put it through. But these things are so visual, and I don't know, to me, they should be done on a 1 in 40 zoning, so there's got enough buffer around it. Put them in a 1 in 40 zoning, that's my opinion on it.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky, are the recently approved solar gardens in Sand Creek Township a good idea? Why or why not?
I don't know if they're a good idea. I know that from following the process, they were an allowed use on those properties. And the county board, in the zoning, decided that they were an allowed use in those particular properties. If from a planning standpoint, they should have been in 1 in 40 or in a different location, I think that could have been done and resolved sooner. I hope that's the kind of thing I can bring to the county board, is some of that foresight to say, okay, if all these are allowed uses on this property, let's keep up with things and make sure that that's not going to cause problems for the neighbors, that type of thing. So I think we need to be friendly to property owners. We need to allow them to do what they want with their property, but then we need to really put in conditions to protect their neighbors.
Well, thank you, District 1 candidates. District 4 candidates, let's talk about taxes for a couple of minutes. Shakopee residents have seen a massive rise in property taxes recently. What role have county programs played in that increase, and what would you do about it? Ms. Marshall, we'll begin with you.
Well, I want to remind people when they get their tax statement that there are 3 line items on there, and the county's only one of them. Many of our school districts have had referendums within the last year, and they weren't small. And so when you look at city taxes, any improvement in a city, a facility that is high dollar, that's going to send up the city taxes, and school referendums will increase school district taxes, and the third line is the county. I would say people that I've talked to recently have said the county line was lowest or near the lowest, and the total impact of that tax statement really needed to be spread across all 3 entities. Plus, you have special taxing districts that have the right to tax and add that to the tax statement. Unfortunately, that document comes from the county, and people need to remember that it's not just the county that assesses those taxes.
Mr. Beer, what role have county programs played in the property tax increase recently, and what would you do about it?
Well, it's definitely been a hornet's nest in Shakopee, and Prior Lake has had a little piece of that as well. So yeah, part of that is referendums. And as I look around this room, and I'm really hoping people are going to be watching online later, but people need to engage. And it's also incumbent upon us to engage the people in new and different ways. So, I mean, we hear it all the time, and I'm sure you guys have as well. Oh, we didn't know this was happening. We didn't know. You get your tax statement, but there were opportunities to voice your opinion. And I think that's part of it, because had they known, they probably would have opposed it. But from the county perspective, there are things we can do. There are things that impact Prior Lake, Shakopee, Belle Plaine, all of Scott County. Scott County, the current board, implemented a new 0.5% sales tax for transit. Also implemented a wheelage tax and have consistently increased that. So we continue to find new ways to burden the people of Scott County, and that is not right.
Well, pivoting to that tax question that you just raised, Scott County has instituted a countywide sales tax allocated specifically for county road projects. Do you support the sales tax that used specifically to improve roads in Scott County? And if not, how would you suggest Scott County fund road repairs? Mr. Beer, we'll begin with you.
This is a great question. I love this question. When we talk about, hopefully we're going to be elected officials, but we have 2 elected officials up here currently, and we've got other elected officials. I would hope that we could trust what we hear from our elected officials, from our leaders. And so part of that is, that's on top of the county levy already. So if we're going to tell people that, hey, Scott County, we're one of the lowest per capita of any county, and we're the model of all these counties, and yet have a 0.5% sales tax that is really a levy tax, but it's on the outside, so it doesn't get included, and then you have these wheelage taxes, I do not support starting new taxes the way that this happened. I think that's absolutely wrong from an elected official to present things to the people that are disengaged enough and say it in a way that is completely wrong.
Ms. Marshall, do you support the sales tax that is used specifically to improve Scott County roads? And if not, how would you suggest that Scott County fund road repairs?
I was involved in the discussion on this tax from the very beginning, and we had 2 public hearings about a year apart because we weren't ready to implement that tax yet. By the second public hearing, it was pretty clear that there were advantages to putting that tax in place because we were told by the legislature, you can either implement the 0.5% yourself, or there is a bill in process that you may be taxed 100%. And if you go and implement it yourself, we will just put that other law away. Now we did implement it about a year ago. It raised $7.6 million in this year. It's estimated that 1/3 of that came from the 10 million visitors who come to our county every year, use our roads, visit our entertainment facilities, restaurants, shopping. And the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce sent a letter to the county before that was implemented supporting the tax because the residents and businesses knew that it was vital to the community, vital to the residents, and helping our visitors pay that
Mr.
tax
Beer.
was better than putting it on a
30
levy.
seconds to rebut.
I get it. There's never any easy answers. But the way it's communicated is not right. So it's a $8 million tax that this 0.5% sales tax has brought in. And maybe 1/3 of it, I'll even go along with that. Maybe 1/3 of that has been from people outside the county. That means 2/3 have been borne by the backs of Scott County residents, which is an additional burden on top of the levy. And don't say it's the lowest tax of many counties and then have this other thing hanging in there and not include that.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. Challenge, Ms. Marshall, 30 seconds to rebut.
I would just say that the residents who live here use those roads too. And if we don't maintain our infrastructure and we let them fall apart, it's going to cost a whole lot more by delaying it, and we're going to pay the price anyway. So those taxes for road improvements and for building roads, making them safer, it comes from the taxpayers. And why not ask the visitors who come here to use those same roads to help pay for it? It's a user fee.
Well, candidates, for our last question this evening, political opinions invariably influence how we vote and how we make decisions. Now, despite the fact that you are running for nonpartisan positions, how might your personal political views influence how you serve Scott County? And how do you believe your opponents' views might influence how they serve Scott County? Ms. Marshall, will begin with you. How do your personal political views influence how you serve the county, and how do you believe your opponents' views might influence how they serve the county?
I've been a fiscal conservative for as long as I can remember, and my family knows that. And the way I look at county budgets is the same way I do in my own home and in regional boards, because the money that supports those budgets comes from the taxpayers. We have opportunities to add to our budget things that are in the nice-to-haves. Until we can put in place all the services that are really needed by the residents, we shouldn't even be considering those things. You know, I've been conservative. When we were a young family, we struggled just like many of the families are today. I have senior citizen friends who want to stay in their home. I know these people and I hear from them. Let's keep the taxes at affordable levels so that we can support people in wherever they are in life, a young family or a senior citizen and everything in between.
Mr. Beer, how might your personal political views influence how you serve Scott County, and how might your opponents' political views influence how they serve Scott County?
You know, I think it really comes down to, what are your convictions? What do you stand for? And, you know, we have these 1-minute sound bites up here tonight, so I would again encourage anybody watching this to go to the website, voteforbeer.com, and look and see what I stand for, because I think it's important. It's really important that we understand. And if we aren't in this thing together, working things out for the best that we can for this county, we have got to be able to stand up to the state, to the Met Council, to these other forces that come into us, and we just get rolled over, and we end up having to pay the price for that. And that is not right. We can do better. Scott County, we can do better. I think you deserve it out there in the seats, watching online. We've got a quality of life, we've got a way of life, we've got a gem here, and it needs to be honed, and it isn't. Thank you.
Ms. Weckman-Brecky, how might your personal political views influence how you serve Scott County, and how do you believe your opponents' political views might influence how they serve Scott County?
I believe my opponent and I have fairly similar political views about fiscal responsibility. That's very true. I believe that keeping taxes low, keeping people able to live here and enjoy life here is very important. The difference is I'm enthused and ready to get involved and figure out the ways to provide the services needed with those scarce resources. We've heard a lot about First Stop Shop and Scale in the last 10 years, and they've done some really great things, but we need those new ideas. We need to figure out what we can do even differently, how we can collaborate more, how we can involve the local jurisdictions even more in making this county even better without raising taxes. And I think fiscal responsibility is the key. Mr. Beer said it well, we're a steward, we have a fiduciary duty when we're an elected official, and that's most important.
Mr. Wagner, how might your personal political views influence how you serve Scott County, and how do you believe your opponents' political views may influence how they serve Scott County?
Well, with Ms. Brecky, I think, again, what she said was somewhat agree on, but I don't know. Representing the townships, growing up and born and raised in a township, I always have a certain amount of cynicism towards government. In fact, we always have this expression, may the Lord bless and keep Scott County far away from us. But thanks to the cynicism, it's like getting back to that 0.5% sales tax. It's fine and good, it's great, it sounds great. How you raise a lot of money is you tax a little bit to everybody. I voted against that. One of the reasons I did is that I think you insult the people of Scott County when you say that that tax is going to sunset. It ain't going to sunset, people. It's going to always be there. And that's my feeling. I guess I get uncomfortable sometimes with the role of Scott County government. I think it can be a little bit intrusive, and I don't know. But that's my personal view. Thank you.
Well, candidates, our time is running out, and there are certainly more questions to ask. I personally had 9 more I wanted to ask you this evening. Anyone who's not had an opportunity to ask a question this evening or to hear their issue discussed should feel free to make contact with you after the debate this evening, contact your campaign offices, or visit your campaign presences online. But now we have 1 minute for each of you to give a closing statement. Ms. Weckman-Brecky will begin with you.
Again, thanks to the Chamber and River Valley Church for hosting it. Thanks to everybody who's come tonight. It's nice to see familiar faces in the audience. I'm really excited to serve District 1 as County Commissioner. I think that one thing I've heard just a couple weeks ago at a Scott County Township Officers meeting is that those township officials want more interaction with the county. They want to see their county commissioner more. They want to be involved more in having a part in the decisions that impact them so much, and I'm ready to do that. So I hope that you will carefully consider your vote. I hope you will vote for me on November 8th because I'm ready to be Scott County Commissioner. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner, 60 seconds to make a closing statement.
Well, I've been doing it for a while. I think I'm doing a good job. I'm very accessible. I have my business, both of my businesses are right on top of Highway 169. Anybody, and they do it all the time, stop in and talk to me, you got an issue. You know, I'm a funeral director, and at these funerals, I mean, Jordan Aggregates, I mean, the funeral is going on, and somebody's bending my ear about Jordan Aggregates. And, but like I said, I don't know. I'm born here, lived here, I'll die here. I think I'm doing a good job, and I'd like to keep doing it. Thank you.
Ms. Marshall, 60 seconds.
Thank you. You know, in 2015, Scott County kind of made history. It was the first time in our history that we received a AAA bond rating for fiscal responsibility and prudent spending. Not only that, but economic development and future outlook. That doesn't happen by accident. We're one of 6 counties in Minnesota to have that rating and one of 90 in the nation. So it takes work to get that, partnerships and being at the table and really look at our spending. We have added over $450 million in business development in the last few years, 3,500 livable wage jobs. We continue to grow because people come here for the way of life, the quality of life we have. We have new libraries, we have parks, regional parks, trails, and low crime rate, low unemployment, low poverty. I have a website too, and I expand on all the issues, barbaramarshall.com, and I would just caution you on Mr. Beer's website, he creates a scenario about eminent domain that Scott County has never used to force someone from their home and take their property. It is absolutely wrong.
Mr. Beer, your closing statement.
Check it out. It's out there. Please do that and be informed. I love Scott County. I live in Prior Lake. I love Prior Lake. I own a business in Shakopee. So our district is a little unique. It's Prior Lake and Shakopee, and you need to be able to represent both of those towns well. We do disagree on a few things, as you might imagine. But every time I meet Barbara at these events like this, I remind you, we're opponents, we're not enemies. I'm not sure she believes me yet, but that's in my heart. We're opponents, we are not enemies. And we do disagree on some things. Eminent domain is one, taxes is another, the way we communicate those things, but 20 seconds, we're not probably going to cover all that. I really want you to consider voting for Beer on November 8th. It's a fresh set of eyes. Barbara's been here for 20 years. I suspect she's accomplished many of her things. I think that's a really long period of time. A fresh set of eyes, I think, will bring about some change, some needed change in Scott County. Thank you. Vote for Beer.
Well, the views expressed this evening in tonight's debate are those of the candidate, not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber and Visitors Bureau sponsors this event as a service to the community, and we go to great lengths to ensure the objectivity of this forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. Thank you to you in the audience this evening. Thank you to our hosts, River Valley Church, and to Shakopee Kids Voting. On behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you as well to all of our candidates. We appreciate your time, your candor, and your service to our community. You are serving us all well. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Please remember to vote. We'll now take a 10-minute intermission while we prepare for our State House candidates. Thank you and good night.